It made me cry.
This One's Wife, Sentebale Defeat. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. You will recall that in March, Dr. Sophie Chandauka, the chairman of Sentebale, made a number of claims with regard to harassment and misogyny, she called it misogynoir, taking place within the charity. This resulted in the resignations of Prince Harry as patron of the charity and several of its trustees. It was thrown into crisis. Dr. Chandauka stood by her allegations and was interviewed and was very clear and coherent with regard to what she had to state. She was entirely confident about the position. This naturally did not show Prince Harry nor the trustees in a good light, and it also brought to the fore the fact that this one's wife had once again been interfering, as she had pressured Harry to place pressure upon Dr. Chandauka with regard to the reputation of this one's wife. Unsurprising that that would occur. As a consequence of the problems that arose, the Charity Commission undertook an investigation to find out what had been going on, looking at the governance and the issues that had been raised. Well, as Gordon Rayner reports for The Telegraph, the Duke of Sussex has lost his battle for control of the charity that he set up in his mother's memory, as the watchdog criticised him for his part in a damaging bullying row. The Charity Commission investigation into the affair has found problems with Sentebale's governance and rebuked all parties that were involved for allowing the spat to play out in public, but ruled that Dr. Chandauka and the current board could remain in place, meaning that she has in effect emerged victorious. Harry is said to be utterly devastated by what he regards as a hostile takeover of the charity and has signalled that his split from Sentebale is now permanent. Another Sussex involvement that's gone down the pan. And what is interesting is that it shows another aspect of Harry's personality, whereby that he isn't able to function effectively without the guardrails of the palace, and it shows just how easily manipulated he is by this one's wife, with the result of what is commonly called a Markling, whereby something that she's related to, had an involvement with, had a relationship with, ends up turning to shit. You see, for Harry, what he has needed is those grey suits around him to tell him, go and do this, go and do that, you've put your trousers on the wrong way around. In effect, they were the guardrails which allowed him to harness the better aspects of his personality effectively. It G'd him up. It gave him purpose. It provided him, as a not particularly clever and somewhat lazy individual, with mentoring or a guiding light to be effective with regard to what he has done. One noteworthy aspect was, of course, that he hadn't really done much with the charity for the last 5 years, which is interesting, isn't it? Because what does that coincide with? Oh, when he and this one's wife left their roles as working members of the royal family. It would appear that since he got married and then Megxit occurred, that his enthusiasm has somewhat dropped off. He hasn't got that machine there any longer that would act as those guardrails that would remind him of what he needed to do. For instance, instead, he turns up with a Netflix crew at an event, which demonstrates that he doesn't fully understand the consequences of how he behaves. Without that guiding palace team, he just seems to blunder into things and not learn from his previous mistakes. And the difficulty he has is that he hasn't really learned how he should do things because he's not particularly bright, he's easily led, and he's always had a machine telling him what to do. And when he's been cut loose from that machine, which was part of his wife's control over him, his shortcomings have been not only exposed, but then they have been exploited by this one's wife. And the consequence is that because she has turned his head and has caused him to not become as involved with the charity in the way that the palace did cause him to be involved, look what happens. The charity ends up in this fight, ends up in this chaos. And this is because Harry didn't have the palace machine instructing him as to what he ought to do to remain involved with the charity, and because he's busy pursuing the things that his wife think are important, chaos ensues. If the Commission had launched a statutory inquiry into Sentebale, there would have been pressure on the chair to leave, which could have meant that Harry would return. But the watchdog, the Charity Commission, has decided that a statutory inquiry is unnecessary, and that means that Dr. Chandauka can remain in post. That means there's no way back for Harry. Harry hit back at the Commission's findings, saying its investigations had fallen troublingly short, and the consequences of Dr. Chandauka's actions will not be borne by her, but by the children who rely on Sentebale's support. Well, he's bound to respond in a petulant fashion, as that is his style. It's a bitter blow, of course, for him. He set up the charity with Prince Siso of Lesotho to continue the work of his mother by supporting children with HIV and AIDS. You recall, the row began when Dr. Chandauka was asked to step down following disagreements about fundraising, including accusations that she spent £500,000 on consultants to find wealthy donors in the United States, something she denied. She then responded by suing the charity and reporting it to the Charity Commission, alleging bullying, harassment, misogyny, and misogynoir. This then triggered the resignations. The Commission explained in a statement, "The regulator has criticised all parties to the dispute for allowing it to play out publicly," and further concluded that the then trustees' failure to resolve disputes internally severely impacted the charity's reputation and risked undermining public trust in charities more generally. Interestingly, the Commission said it had found no evidence of widespread or systematic bullying or harassment, including misogyny or misogynoir, but it acknowledged a strong perception of ill treatment felt by a number of parties to the dispute and the impact this may have had on them personally. Accordingly, they haven't found the bullying that Dr. Chandauka spoke of. In a statement, a spokesman for Harry stated, "Sentebale has been a deeply personal and transformative mission for Prince Harry, established to serve some of the most vulnerable children in Lesotho and Botswana." In his response to the report, Harry continued the public spat by describing Sentebale as a once brilliant charity that had helped more than 100,000 children during his time as patron. He said he would now focus on finding new ways to continue supporting the children of Lesotho and Botswana. A friend of Harry said he could not now see any way the prince could ever return to Sentebale. After carrying out a compliance investigation into Sentebale, the watchdog issued it with a regulatory action plan to address governance weaknesses after finding that there had been mismanagement in the administration of the charity. It did not escalate the investigation to a statutory inquiry, meaning Dr. Chandauka will be allowed to address the issues with a largely new board of trustees, whom the Commission has said have been validly appointed. You'll recall in the television interview, Dr. Chandauka complained about her treatment by Prince Harry, citing the incident at the end of the charity polo match in Miami last year, where this one's wife had turned up, seeking to cause Dr. Chandauka to swap places, and that resulted in Dr. Chandauka having to awkwardly duck under a trophy that prompted questions from the media about this one's wife's behaviour. She also explained, "Prince Harry asked me to issue some sort of statement in support of the Duchess, and I said I wouldn't. Not because I didn't care about the Duchess, but because I knew what would happen if I did, and because we cannot be an extension of the Sussexes." It was also explained by her that as tensions between the Sussexes and the royal family grew, it became harder to raise funds for the charity, and that she had been a victim of this unleashing of the Sussex machine. The Commission actually found no evidence of overreach by Harry as patron of the charity, but was critical of the charity's lack of clarity in delegations to the chair, which allowed for misunderstandings to occur. This lack of clarity around roles and around internal policies had exacerbated tensions, which culminated in the dispute. In a series of criticisms, the Commission found that the delegation of certain powers to Dr. Chandauka was a confusing, convoluted, and poorly governed process, that the then trustees did not have a proper complaints process in place, and that it was not satisfied that public statements made to the media and public criticism made in television interviews were conducted in a way that served the charity's best interests. In future, it said, the charity should have a clearly defined patron role set out in writing. Ultimately, gaps in governance have caused a problem, and all sides have had their bottoms smacked by the Charity Commission. But the totality of this is that the allegations of bullying have not been made out. Nevertheless, what has happened is because the board can remain in place, there's no statutory inquiry, Harry isn't getting Sentebale back. And once again, it demonstrates the cack-handed way that Harry deals with matters, and in particular, since he has left the protective ambit of the palace and been exposed to the world more widely, egged on and pushed by this one's wife. You cannot underestimate the extent to which Harry needs some form of handler. The deep insecurities that he has, his lack of intelligence, the privileged lifestyle that he's been used to, means that in effect he has been rendered in a way where it would perhaps be best to describe him as de-skilled, assuming that he had some skills to begin with, that he hasn't got the ability to function in the way that many other people would. In part, some of that isn't actually his fault. He cannot help but the fact that he was born a prince and what he'd been raised as. But the fact is that this means that he needs a machine like the palace to keep him in line. Remove that, you're left with someone who's like a spinning top. And then along comes, of course, a new handler, but one that utilises him only for her interests. And once again, this one's wife becomes involved, and what's the result? Harry loses a charity that he cared about, that he'd shown less enthusiasm for as a consequence of the involvement of this one's wife, and now it would appear there's no way back for him, and it is defeat. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.